Good afternoon everybody, buon pomeriggio a tutti. Allora, abbiamo l'onore di avere
We have the honor of having with us Alexander Ivantchev, the head of the Justice Section of the European Commission. He will make a first presentation on interoperability and relations with Codex. Thanks so much for coming.
Once again, I'm very pleased to be here to make this short presentation on the e-Codex system, which some of you may be familiar with, and also the role of the system in the context of our proposal for digitalization of cross-border judicial cooperation. And I've been asked by the organizers to specifically also mention the impact of this proposal on the work of the notary profession, which I will do. So, let me start with a short overview of e-Codex. So, what is e-Codex? e-Codex is one of our European IT systems which has been worked on for a number of years. I expect that some or most of you are familiar with it, but nonetheless I should go through the background. The background of e-Codex is that a decade ago, if not more than a decade, a group of member states approached the Commission and we started the discussion of do we need an IT system for the secure, reliable and interoperable exchange of data and information across borders in the context, of course, of EU judicial cooperation, civil, commercial and criminal matters. And the short answer obviously is yes, if we're talking about it 10 years later. So work started on building such a system. This system was designed and foreseen from the very onset as being a decentralized one, which means that to the almost full extent, the European institutions and the European Commission have no role to play in those exchanges. You know, a European arrest warrant goes from country A to country B. A European order for payment goes from country C to country D. Although we do have some involvement in all this work, the Commission is not really a competent sign to those exchanges, regulated by the multitude of instruments we have by today in these areas. So that means that's what it means, a decentralized system, that all member states and all competent authorities within those member states are the ones who will actually, the ones that will use this system. The system technically, and I'll go into it into a bit more detail, but it's what we call a content agnostic system. So we have a system which itself doesn't really care about what it exchanges, as long as these exchanges are carried out reliably in an encrypted form and offer the possibility for interoperability across member states and the possibility for member states to connect their national systems. It started as an idea, then it became a pilot project. So thanks to EU co-financing, the e-Codex system was developed with its various components. And today I'm pleased to say that as of June this year, we have a new regulation on e-Codex. This is Regulation 850 from 2022, which does two things. It establishes the e-Codex system in the legal world. And secondly, it ensures its sustainability and its future development by transferring the responsibility in this regard to the EULISA agency. EULISA is an agency seated in Tallinn, Estonia, and its technical sites are respectively in Strasbourg with a backup site in Austria. So far, EULISA has been dealing primarily with systems in the home affairs area, so e-Codex is, I think, the second system in the justice field which the agency will continue developing. So, I should also say what e-Codex isn't, to dispel any doubts that might be that. First of all, it is, as I said, I think already, it's not a system meant for any particular use. Obviously, we talk about e-Codex as a system to support exchange of data in the context of judicial proceedings, cross-border judicial proceedings. But essentially, it is a interoperability layer system. It's what they call middleware in the IT world. So it sits in the middle between existing and or future national IT solutions. So if you have an IT system for sending European orders for payment, you want to communicate with the receiving body in another member state. To do that, you obviously need an interoperability layer, and this is where eCodex comes in. So eCodex on its own is not really useful. You have to put it in the context of a particular use case, specific procedures. It's also a message-based system technically, so it's not quite useful for real-time streaming of data. If you want to do an audio video conference, that's not really the best system, right? Because it's based on a messaging workflow, so you send a message, you receive an acknowledgement, then the respective component sends the message further on, etc., etc. So what are the eCodex components from a technical point of view? So first of all, we have what we call the access point. So for any member state where eCodex is used or will be used, there is the need to deploy the access point, which consists of two elements. One is the eCodex gateway, which ensures interoperability and encryption of the data between two countries, two member states. And then you have a separate component which talks with the gateway that's called the eCodex connector. And the eCodex connector provides a number of additional features, and the key ones are, first of all, that the connector, essentially the way it works is that once you send a Form A under a small claim procedure with supporting documents, all these documents are then nicely packaged in a payload package, which is then generated as a so-called ASIC container. ASIC is an ETSI standard for signed containers of data. What this allows is then for the receiving party to verify that the container signature hasn't been tampered with, whether the container hasn't been tampered with. So this is message-based security. I apologize, I'm getting a bit too technical, so I hope you're able to follow. I know that many of you here are with a technical background, so hopefully that's the case. Then another element which I think is also relevant to the next discussion is the so-called Trust OK token. And this essentially means signature verification. So when eCodex was started as a project, eIDAS was not there. And our counterparts in the member states, Austria, Germany, Italy, other member states, they were thinking, okay, how do we ensure the trust between the sending and the receiving side? Now with eIDAS, you have a rule which says if it's signed by a qualified electronic signature, it's legally admissible, that's fine. But we did not have that. So the way eCodex works is that the signature of the documents which are sent through eCodex is verified at the sending site. And it's essentially the sending site which vouches and said, I have checked this against the European Trust List and or my national list, and I can vouch that the documents feature a valid signature. So this is how it still works today, and we probably need to change this now that we are starting to use eCodex for the formal digitalization of judicial cooperation. But the output of this verification mechanism won't change, and this essentially means that once eCodex does this verification, the connector that is, it produces a nice PDF with 3 traffic lights. So you can get a red traffic light, a yellow traffic light, or a green traffic light. And the value of this is that in our interaction so far, we realize that it's quite often very difficult for judicial authorities to understand what these signatures mean and how do they verify them. I mean, it's not that easy. Even if you use a user solution like Adobe Acrobat, you need to know where to click, what to look for, and it becomes a matter for the technicians, obviously. We were looking for a more, let's say, human-centric solution, so that's how this idea came up, to have these traffic lights. So, of course, the mapping of the traffic lights is configurable, so you can, tomorrow we can say we only give a traffic light if all the documents feature a qualified electronic signature, and this signature has not expired, has not been revoked, and the package has not been tampered with, etc., etc. So all the technical criteria have been fulfilled. So I think this is a nice example of how to do signature verification in a user-friendly way with these semaphores. Of course, if you have a more technical inclination, you can of course look at the documents, the signatures of all the documents. And by the way, we support, I think, CADES, PADES, and XML, XADES signatures. We use a specific library, but I'll talk about it hopefully in the next panel. So finally, the connector provides the so-called proof of delivery. So in a way, it's a way to ensure that there is proof that a certain document was transferred from gateway A, from connector A to connector B, And there, this is based on RAM evidences, and this is not an ETSI standard. So these are components of e-Codex in a nutshell, but of course, to digitalize a particular procedure, such as, again, the European payment order procedure, you need more than that. You need, first of all, to have the XML schemas for all the forms. You need to have the defined workflows, who sends what to whom. You need to have the business process modules, the specific requirements. So to digitalize a procedure, you need to do all this, obviously, parallel work in order to define a workflow which makes use of e-Codex. Of course, there are also supporting elements, such as a testing platform, a system which distributes the configuration within the decentralized system, and so on and so forth. So, just a quick overview of where e-Codex is already used today. So, first of all, the consortium of member states, which has, and other organizations, I should say, who have developed e-Codex, have also piloted certain use cases already, and these are the, amongst other things, the electronic exchange of European payment orders and small claims. Then you are probably familiar with the iSupport system, which has been developed by the Hague Conference on Private International Law. There are a certain number of countries use e-Codex to communicate between member states on cross-border child maintenance obligation claims. And more recently, we actually launched the first Commission-built system. This is the so-called e-evidence digital exchange system, which essentially digitalizes the exchanges under the European investigation order. That's an instrument in criminal matters, so I don't know whether you know about it, but we have it now live and operational. And we have already, 8 member states, and hopefully we will have more than that. But this is so far on voluntary basis. And finally, the use of e-Codex and the platform which we built for e-evidence is going to be used for the digitalization of the service of documents and taking in evidence recast regulations, which I suppose some or all of you know that there, for the first time, the EU legislator has mandated that service of document requests, taking of evidence requests between competent authorities must by default be sent digitally. And the underlying system for that is e-Codex. So, I spoke for quite a while, and there are a lot of elements. So let me try to give you an example here with this slide, which hopefully illustrates how it all comes together. So in this example, I'm using the Service of Documents Recast Regulation as an example, and I suppose that a central authority, a transmitting authority, wants to send a document to the receiving authority in another member state. So how does it work in practice? So first of all, there is, of course, a competent official or a person who makes the request. They need to log in to the respective national IT system. And here I open an important bracket, because so far it seems that very few member states have done any development of such national systems for the European procedures. And that is why we have developed a common European solution. You don't have to use that solution as a member state, but if you use it, you get all the support from the Commission. You have guarantees that it works with e-Codex, that it's been tested, etc., etc. So you log into the national solution, you encode the request in the system, you digitally sign it with your qualified signature, and you click send. So what happens next? It goes to the e-Codex connector, which gets all the documents as I explained. It puts them in an ASIC container, it signs the documents again as a package, and then this is sent to the e-delivery or e-Codex access point or gateway, which takes care of securely transmitting this to the destination member state. This happens over the internet, by the way, but it's a secure encrypted connection with mutual transport layer security verification of both sides. So once the receiving e-Codex delivery gateway receives this package, it passes it on to the connector, which verifies the signature, checks that it hasn't been broken, replaced, tampered with, and then it's delivered to the respective national system. That could be, in that case, the receiving authority, or it could be a system the member states may have for direct service of judicial documents to the end user, if that is the case, or it could be for execution to an official, to a judicial officer or a bailiff. Again, this is an example in the context of service of documents. So this is, I think, a rather simple example of how this system works. And of course, if you want to send a reply, it works exactly the same way otherwise. The thing I did not mention, and this going back to the start of my presentation, is that, of course, you need to know which is the competent authority which is going to receive this document. And for that purpose, for a number of years now, the Commission, together with member states, with the notaries, with the bailiffs, because in some countries for certain civil law instruments it's not courts or judicial officers, and I'll say a few words about that too. So we have established this common directory of the competent authorities, which is being regularly updated, so you can use it as an address book to know, okay, I want to send this to this country and who is the competent body, you know, for this claim. All right, so this is eCodex, is a technical solution supporting judicial cooperation, but now let me say a few words about our 2021 proposal on digitalization of cross-border judicial cooperation. So, just like the revision of the EIDAS regulation, this was obviously something which came out as a result of our endeavors to come up quickly with solutions which could respond to the COVID pandemic, and you know, in our area of work that would be the judicial cooperation in civil, commercial, and criminal matters. So, following all the experience we have had with the negotiations on service of documents and taking of evidence, we took a rather ambitious approach, and that approach essentially mandates that we would like to have the digital channel as the default one, not just for 1, 2, or 3 instruments, but for all relevant instruments in the area of civil and criminal judicial cooperation. So, in December 2021, the Commission proposal was adopted, and making the mandatory digital by default communication between authorities with the use of qualified electronic signatures is one of its core elements in Article 3 thereof. We have planned this work in batches. I mean, we want to do it step by step. So by 2029, if all goes well, we should have all these instruments such as the European Account Preservation Order, small claims, EIOs, etc., digitalized. We support member states, of course, in this regard by providing them with this reference implementation solution, any codex. So if they don't want to make new investments, they can use the common European solution. There is also another element in the Commission's proposal which provides a possibility for individuals and businesses. I have underlined this possibility because we keep getting this question, well, what about the digital divide? Why are you forcing people living in rural areas, people to use the digital channel? And of course, that's not what we do. I mean, if you don't want to use the digital channel, you don't have to use the digital channel. But of course, there is a major chunk of Europe's population of people who are, you know, digitally advanced, and for them it's a major convenience, and we'd like to give them this possibility. So in our proposal, we give the option to file claims online directly using the European e-Justice portal, for instance, directly to the relevant authority, competent authority, and pay the relevant court fees. It could be a simple bank transfer, it could be whatever payment method the country offers. There are also a number of flanking measures. I don't want to spend too much time on that, so we talk about the guaranteed legal effects of electronic documents. Just to underline, because I think this is important, that when it comes to document conversion requirements, legal validity, that's out of scope of the proposal. We leave this to the national law. How a paper document becomes a legally valid electronic one and vice versa. And another element which I'm not going to spend time talking about today is that we now have a legal basis for holding cross-border hearings in both civil and criminal proceedings. So it doesn't really say use this technology or these are the rules, but it sets out the common rules for how, for instance, if you're holding a video conferencing, you need to ensure that the parties' procedural and fundamental rights are ensured, and that also the right to confidential communication with the lawyer is guaranteed, etc. Okay, so what does this mean for the civil law notaries? You know probably better than I do that a civil law notaries in some countries, for some instruments, the respective countries have designated notaries and bailiffs as competent authorities in lieu of courts or other agencies and bodies. And we have in the Commission this mapping table, which we probably will consult you with on some point, because our information may not be completely accurate. But here are some non-exhaustive examples we have already gathered for this meeting by way of example. So, for instance, notaries could be the ones to whom a request for a digital European certificate of succession is made. Also, under Brussels 2B, notaries are competent for approving authentic instruments on divorce or parental responsibility. Hungarian notaries are competent for the issuance of a European order for payment. As far as I know, it's only in Hungary, you see, so it's quite a diverse picture. But since we aim to digitalize this cooperation, obviously there will be a need to work closely with those notarial organizations which have such competence for those instruments and see how we can onboard them in the best possible way. So what does this mean in practice? Well, once the regulation is adopted, we are currently, well, not we, but the Czech presidency of the Council of the EU will most likely achieve a general approach on the Commission's proposal by December this year. And then next year, the negotiations with the European Parliament will commence, and we are hopeful that, we in the Commission are hopeful that the proposal will be adopted sometime next year. So once it's adopted, the next step is to adopt the relevant implementing acts, which inter alia includes aspects related to specifications, workflows, who does what in terms of design of all these XML schemas specific to each instrument, all the workflows, who sends what to what, finalize the systems specifications essentially to everybody's, all stakeholders' full satisfaction. So we do plan, I can confirm this here and now, that we do plan to involve all the notariats who have a competence, such as Hungary for the EPO, for instance, in these discussions for the respective instrument. Now, but one thing I would like to already flag in this meeting today is that a practical aspect of this digitalization is the need that the respective notarial organizations, which are competent for these civil law instruments, deploy such access point to the decentralized IT system based on e-codex. So that could be an access point developed and operated by the National Ministry of Justice, just like the colleague from Estonia has explained they do for the e-Portalis was its system. Or it could be an IT entry point operated by the respective notariate organization itself, or it can be any other arrangement for that matter. But that's not for us in the EU level to make. That's a decision to be made, but it has to be made because, as explained, the notaries will be an integral part of these exchanges. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.